Today is Wednesday, March 5th, 2025. We are in the classroom on the campus of Hilbert College. I'm the interviewer, Amy Moritz, and I'm with Kara Rehbaum, who played basketball at Canisius College from 1980 to 1984, graduating as the program's all-time leading scorer at the time. In 1984, she played professionally for the Atlanta Comets in the Women's American Basketball Association. She returned to Canisius as an assistant coach in 1986 and was named head coach in 1993. Kara joined the Hilbert College athletic department staff in 2004, and today she's the assistant athletics director and sports information director for Hilbert. Kara, thanks for your time today.
Hi.
I'm excited to talk to you. So first, kind of a out there question maybe for some people, but tell me about a time when you first remember falling in love with sports.
I would say it would obviously go back to my childhood. The neighborhood games, my childhood friends, my siblings, the competitive nature in our family. It was really a different time. There were no screens, TV, 3 channels. You had to watch it live. You couldn't record it. So everything we did in my life was physical activity. So my first memories are playing basketball with my brother and him telling stories that, I was beating him up all the time. But I looked at it from a different angle, that I was playing someone that was 2 years older than me and a man or boy. And we just had fun. And then, the kickball in the streets, the tag, the swimming, just being physically active was my piece of cake. The good memory that I do have is, and I think it's what really struck home to me that I could be a good athlete, was in middle school. There was a little trophy. It was plastic. It was, something at the dollar store now. But the PE teachers handed it to one senior or one 8th grader or 7th grader. I don't remember the year, but it said most athletic. And that was a light bulb that went off. Oh, this is where I fit. I don't need to be in the popular group. I just need to feel good about myself. And so that's how I remember sports growing up.
That's so fantastic, that family, and then that it kind of got, your teacher kind of saw that in you as well, right?
Yeah.
And that inspired you to...
Right. And it was about being in a community. It was the teamwork, early teamwork, and relying on each other. And that was, to me, normal and what I expected, I think, the rest of my life. And I really think it has carried through as a through line.
So you grew up in the Rochester, New York area. Mm-hmm. Tell me about your, high school playing days, and what sports you played, and what it was like playing, at girls' high school basketball and other sports. That would have been late 70s, right?
Again, at that time, we could play 4 sports in a school year. So I was on the soccer team in the fall, on the volleyball team from Halloween-ish until very late December, early January, basketball in January, February. And then I threw the shot and disc in the spring. Never knew anything about that sport. Had no concept of technique or even how to spin or, deliver a shot or a disc. But again, another PE teacher saw something in me, and so I joined the team and ended up being an all-county track and field, shot put disc, basketball, all-county. Volleyball was my weakest sport. I didn't take it seriously. It was the in-between end of soccer, before basketball. And then in soccer, I was an all-county athlete. So it was, again, my life. It was where I felt comfortable. You go to the Mean Girls movie. I was probably that, girls lacrosse player that everybody was afraid of. But I didn't feel like that was my only story. I was very involved in other things in high school, but sports is where I found my identity. I was able to play travel soccer in the summers. I played in the Empire State Games it started in 78 was the very first year. So I was fortunate to be involved in the Empires for, I don't know, like 10, 11 years, a long time, through college and after college. But it was where I spent my time. I didn't go to the art galleries. I didn't go to the musicals. I was involved in athletics.
And were you unique in that you went from those four sports, or did most girls play multiple sports?
I would say that 3 of my close high school friends, we all kind of patterned after each other. It wasn't uncommon to be a multi-sport athlete. And I think those type of athletes continue to play longer, the longevity of their careers, because they were not so sport-focused, injury-riddled, burned out. It was just something new to do every couple months, and it kept us alive and active and happy.
Mm-hmm. And then and it sounds like you did a lot of soccer, but was there a point where basketball kind of took over a little bit?
I think it did because of the Empire State Games.
Okay.
I never considered myself a true soccer player. I think of it more as a basketball player. I was a basketball player. I have a memory of being a camp counselor at the end of my senior year in high school before I became a freshman at Canisius. And I was working at a Mansfield basketball camp. The crazy that me as a high school senior was a camp counselor. And I was just shooting around in I don't know how many gyms. I haven't been back to Mansfield since then, but there was a gentleman in the upper balcony, and he was looking down. He's like, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? You going to college? And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to Canisius. Like, what are you talking about? And he's like, have you ever thought about going to Auburn? And I thought, no, I'm going to Buffalo. Why would I want to go to Syracuse? I totally thought he meant a school in Auburn, New York. That's how small my world was. And then, come find out a couple years later, like, holy cow, that was one of the premier teams in the country that he saw something in me. But I'm very happy that I landed at Canisius and it all worked out.
So that's a great segue. Tell me about how you landed at Canisius.
Empire State Games. I knew the college coach at the time and her assistant, Barb Fields, Karen Kimiak, through the Empire State Games because they were involved in the open division. So it was the scholastic division up through, because it was in the summer, you could play through your junior year, but once you've graduated high school, you have to move on to the open division. So I was in the high school division. They were in the open division. They were recruiting me. I, in my naive mind, thought I could only be successful if I left New York State. And here I am talking about this guy from Auburn. But I thought I wanted to go to Worcester and go to Holy Cross. And I was late in the application process. They didn't have rolling admission. I didn't test out, so I didn't even get special consideration. But my primary focus was on academics, and had I gone there, I wouldn't have gone for the right reason. But at Canisius, they had the physical education with a concentration in athletic training, and that's what I wanted. I wanted to be an athletic trainer. So after receiving not a letter of intent, which we all know about now, a financial aid offer from Canisius. At that time, I was offered a full tuition scholarship, and I let that lapse so that I could look at Holy Cross. But I had to, call up Barb and say, could I please, I'd like to come. And they reoffered it. I signed it, and of course, that's how I ended up at Canisius. But again, right decision. I went there for academics. Basketball has driven me to where I am now. I've reached some pretty lofty heights, but it was really deep down about academics at Canisius. I remember having to fill out an essay in orientation. Tell us why you chose to come to Canisius and the Jesuit education. And I had no idea that Canisius was religious. It was never brought up. I didn't know what a Jesuit was. I'm Catholic, but I've never knew about Jesuits, kind of like the Franciscans at St. Bonaventure. It was the same thing. So I chose Canisius for the academics. Basketball was definitely a driver, but it was the academic end of it.
Okay. And when you played basketball, so when you came to Canisius in 1980, what was the status of women's basketball, women's sports? Was it NCAA Division I? Was it Division? I think it was Division II. Like what was going on at that time?
We were still AIAW.
Oh, you were? Okay.
Yes, and I didn't know. So to go back into high school, let me go back in high school. I didn't realize I was like part of the first 3 or 4 year, the 3rd or 4th year for a high school team. I just assumed it was always there. So when I got to Canisius and we were in the AIAW, I didn't understand what that was because the men were in the NCAA. They were Division I. They had a incredible backstory of being on probation because of something, but people knew who Canisius, they recognized the name. Women's basketball, or all women's sports, AIAW, I didn't understand what that was. I remember, of course, having subscriptions to magazines, Women in Sport. I don't even remember the name of the magazines, but always like going through that and never picking up AIAW while I was in high school. So to get to Canisius, I kind of felt like it was back in high school that we've always been here. We all are funded. We have sneakers. We have uniforms. We have practice gear. But beyond that, I didn't see the inequities between NCAA and AIAW. My freshman year was Barb and Karen's final year. And then my sophomore year was Sister Maria Paris and Mike Rappel's years of coaching. And that was, I believe that was our final year in the AIAW, so that we qualified for a postseason tournament. And I do have a medal that says AIAW. But again, didn't know that was disappearing and dissolving and being absorbed into the NCAA until my junior year when we became Division II. So AIAW institutions, my understanding at that time was you have to choose a level you want to compete at. How can your college fund your program? So some of our opponents that we played, which might have been Cortland, I don't even know Fredonia, but they chose Division III. Canisius chose 2. Syracuse chose 1. Siena College chose 1. So that was the separation in my mind of where we were going at. And we were Division II until 1986, when I returned as an assistant coach. That was a big change too, administratively for the college, and then obviously commitment-wise for our student athletes too. It was a big jump.
Did you notice any difference when you were playing, when you went from AIAW to NCAA Division II? Was there any, as a player, was there any?
No, I didn't notice anything different. What I noticed was potentially a little more funding, a little more equity. Up until probably the 2000s, the women's basketball locker room was in the basement of the Kessler Center, and now they're on the first floor right outside the gym. But at that time, the coaches, Barb and Karen, specifically Barb, She did submit a Title IX red flag at Canisius College because of the inequities. And it kind of goes back to what you were saying in a previous conversation, that the athletes benefited, for sure, but the coaches didn't. And unfortunately, I think that ultimately is a part of the reason why Barb did not continue on as a head coach at Canisius. Though the teams that that she brought in, her personality and her vision, those were the players that became the successful program that we were. Do you know what I mean?
I do, yeah.
So it was unfortunate she didn't get her pat on the back. She got a kick on the butt out the door.
So as you're talking about that, you said earlier, like, so when you even were there, did you notice different things between you, the women's team, and the men's team? Obviously, the locker room is one. As an athlete, I guess, like when you're the administrator, the coach, I think it's easy to see, like, hey, why are you getting that and we're not getting that? But when you're playing, was that something that you and your teammates recognized, or?
I didn't recognize early on. Early on, I didn't. I was just happy to be a college athlete. And one thing I do remember, a men's player who was a junior college transfer in as a junior. I was a freshman. At the end of our first years, of course, he was on some all-conference team. And he kept looking at me like, why aren't you? Why aren't you? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. Like, to me, those things didn't matter. And it was because we were still AIAW. We didn't have a conference. But as we advanced, yes, the men had 4 pairs of sneakers, 2 basketball, 1 each semester, a pair of running, and then a pair of walk-arounds. They had multiple sweatsuits. It was the gear. It was the financial, the physical, the tangible things that they were head and shoulders above us. And for me, it was, I get to play basketball. I don't care that I don't have sneakers to, walk over to the dorms in. They traveled differently. They ate, funding for those extra things became more obvious as I got older and junior and into my senior year. Yes. They had established cage club. They had fans. They had men that each month would have a dinner, and, the coaches would go and the players would have to go and rub elbows with all their alumni supporters. We didn't have that. We were invited to attend some of those, and that's when I realized, there's a whole nother world out here. People wanted to interview the coaches and the players. There was no press. We may have had a newspaper reporter early on cover our team, but I will say the Buffalo News covered our women's basketball team in my junior and senior year, probably even my sophomore year when we began to compete at the national level. There, we were the headline of the college section, which was pretty cool at that time.
Yeah, and I know I was going to ask you a little bit about that. So, like, you had the AIAW, tournament your sophomore year, right? And then I think it was your junior year, NCAA Division II,
right?
Deep postseason. I think it was quarterfinals. I think I saw it, right? So, what was that? I mean, was there a tension? I mean, I guess because I also want to ask you this because I feel like anything pre-Division I, we just kind of like it never happened. And there's a lot of success that happens that programs are built on that is kind of just forgotten.
It's there. You have to look for it. And Canisius is really trying to keep it there, but in its own section. And I can appreciate that because of what I do here at Hilbert. Hilbert used to be very successful, NJCAA, a junior college. Won championships, men and women's basketball. But now we track stats as Division III, and we can't include the junior college stats. So that's essentially what is happening at Canisius, and that's okay. That's quite all right. But the funding, like my junior year when we went to Oskaloosa, Iowa, is where we ended up moving on, advancing out of the New York area or the New England area. The college had to make a decision if they were going to send us, if they financially could send us. There was a big meeting. We as players were called in and said this, essentially put it out on the line. This is a big commitment. We need to know that you will do your best. And we had to sell pizza. We had to fundraise in order to help offset the cost. Do you think that would happen on the men's side? Not at all. So those are the fun memories. Like, are you kidding me? We have to do this, but let's do it. We know everyone on campus. We can suck it up and sell pizza at a quad party where there aren't quad parties anymore, but no one was interested in buying pizza when you could go to the beer truck and not pay anything. But yeah, so those were the struggles. We went to Iowa, a Division II national tournament. I think we only played William Penn, though I could be mistaken. We may have had a second game. I think we did have 2 games out there. But, we flew there. Then we all hopped into like 3 or 4 different station wagons and drove the extra 2 hours late at night to get to our motel. But we were in the national tournament, so it didn't matter. Well, who's going to complain?
Right.
So,
what on the court, like the basketball of it and the team of it, what was that team like?
Very cerebral, very talented physically, great teammates, just great teammates. There was so much talent on that team that at any night someone else could be the leading scorer, and no one cared. It was so unselfish. We played with a focus of doing well, and winning would come, but it wasn't. There wasn't really anyone that was just looking for their own points or rebounds or assists or steals. It was, let's make this work. We know we're a good team. We're going to find ways to do it. So we had great outside shooting. We had, some of our teammates would go to the basket. Others just rather stay out on the perimeter and not go inside at all. But myself and Mary Akramovich were the twin towers. Mary was a 6'4". She's from Tonawanda. She's still here locally, coaches at Sacred Heart, or used to coach at Sacred Heart. But between she and I, other team opponents had their hands full because Mary was finesse and I was a bull. I just, physically beat you up and got to the foul line. So.
And then you played for Sister Maria, who is a Western New York basketball legend. What was it? And when she had just gotten hired, because you were there during that transition, what was it like to play for her?
She was challenging in all the right ways, and when you played for her, if you understood that, you were okay. As a fan of women's basketball and someone watching from the outside, they didn't understand. How can that nun talk that way, act that way, be that way? But that's what drove us. She shot from the hip. She was straightforward, honest. She kind of understood things a little bit better than you thought a nun would. But she was the motivator. Mike Rappel was the brains behind the operation. Sister Maria knew basketball. I don't want to take anything away from her, but her intimidating presence made you play. Mike Rappel really guided us and showed us, A, B, and C, and you can't do D because F won't work. It was they worked well together.
One more question about your playing days before we move on to a little bit after. The timelines of the Little Three always like where they were at, but grew up in Western New York, so Little Three legendary. To me, what were those Little Three games like? For you when you were playing them?
Intense, really intense. I just crazy. I don't know. I could say so much about one rivalry that extended off the court as well as on the court. My senior year, Niagara, they painted their hair purple just for the Canisius game. It was an upset. They won. So you never knew. You just never knew the outcome of the game until the final horn. But I will say that most of those women are now, I would consider friends. Even though, friends in Bonaventure, how would Bonaventure and Buffalo, how would we interact? You find ways. There's a commonality, and you know each other and you're friendly with each other. So sport is incredible. You're the fierce competitors on the field of competition, but off, you're really the same people fighting the same cause, and you understand that. It's kind of like the Bugs Bunny cartoon with Sam and Ralph, the sheepdog and the sheep herder, the fox. What is it? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I know what you're talking about, yeah.
They fight each other. It's the dog that is fighting the coyote, and all day to keep the sheep safe, and he's trying to capture them. At the end of the day, they punch the clock and walk away arm in arm. That's essentially what I felt like my teammates were, because we battled in practice, and then I feel that way about the Little Three rivalries too. It's so funny when the Big Four entered the picture, it was not the same dynamic, totally not the same, because Buffalo being a public school versus three private small schools. So the Little Three is special. And most people don't know about it anymore.
Right. Yeah. That's really...
You talk about history that disappeared.
History that does, yeah, that definitely disappeared. And it felt to me like, well, you lived it differently than I did. I was just a fan. But that also, that rivalry, because it was so intense among the three schools, it's almost when that competition lifts you up. And so certainly deep history in men's basketball, but I think even in women's basketball, like that was, that kind of helped maybe lift the level and lift that intensity of the sport in the region.
Yes. And it got a little more coverage. The Buffalo News, of course, your favorite. But yeah, good memories, really good memories.
So the year after, so you graduate from Canisius, and then you go and play in Atlanta, right? Tell me about this, which is a line in your bio that everyone seems to go over.
Yeah, I was a senior and home on Easter vacation, so wherever that fell, if that was in March or if it were in April. I was just trying to figure out life. Like, what am I going to do after I graduate? Where am I going to go teach? Or will I be an athletic trainer? What will I do? And John Maddock, the sports information director at that time from Canisius, called me at home, and this is strange. And he said, well, I just want you to know you've been drafted. And, my first response was, well, I didn't, they're not taking women in the Army. Why am I being drafted? What is going on? And I had no idea that the sports information office was working behind the scenes, and they entered my name into the draft for the AIAW. I was drafted by the New York team, which never fielded. The organization couldn't get their resources together. Things fell apart. So it went from, I think, like a 10-team league down to a 6 or 5-team league. It really kind of imploded as it progressed. But I did stay in touch with the president of the AIAW and say, I want to, I'm interested what's going on with New York. And he finally called me back and said, listen, you're not having a team in New York, but if you can get to Atlanta, if you can get yourself to Atlanta, they are having a tryout. So I got on a plane. I remember just like, this is it. My parents dropped me off. I sat on the plane crying, like, what am I doing? And got there, naively asked the president of the team who picked me up at the airport, so how far is the ocean from Atlanta? He looked at me like, what are you talking about? Because I grew up on the lake. In Rochester, I grew up in Irondequoit, 3 miles from the lake, so I was always near water. And so I tried out. It was a 2 or 3 day tryout. They extended an invitation to stay. I signed a contract for $6,000, but was never able to keep a copy of the contract. And that was a clear sign. You know, it was bad. But I now was playing with Division I athletes. I was the only Division II athlete that was still, that was on the team. You know, they were talking about SEC, those teams, like, where would you compete with the SEC? And I was like, I don't know. I'm a Division II player. We don't roll in that league. So I learned pretty quickly, you know, these were very talented players. It was a great experience. I just, you know, I lived with people that I hadn't been fortunate enough to have been exposed to. The diversity on that team, their backgrounds much different than mine. And we made it work, but our Georgia team, the owner fabricated his finances. So that contract I signed was nothing more than a piece of paper. The Dallas team, their owner, came through and he funded us each, I don't know, maybe $1,200 so that we could pay our rent. And we bussed in to Dallas. They picked us up in their town cars. You know, they made it easy for us to get there, to move around, but they didn't want to spend any money on us. We played, Nancy Lieberman was on the Dallas team. Her dog, she had a little purse puppy sitting on the bench, and it had a Dallas diamond necklace on. And, you know, we as Atlanta, we were walking by going, I'll just steal that necklace and that'll be my, you know, that could be my pay for the year or whatever. So we survived through. I flew down on October 2nd and I came home at Christmas time, expecting to go back and find a full-time job and then play again the following year. But the league disbanded. It folded, which was okay. It was, I guess, better to find out early than to be back in Atlanta and then be stuck.
So you do that. It sounds like a lot of experiences that a lot of women had in the early stages of trying to do professional women's basketball. Which people, I think, like when you said, like, well, I thought it always was here, or like the WNBA was always, you know, here, which is great that we can think that now, but so many fits and starts.
Yeah.
In that.
Yeah. The WABA was the second women's league. Mm-hmm. I don't know the name of the first women's league. Then someone else tried again and required that the women wear leotards. So, yeah. One piece, boy short, but one piece uniform. That was the requirement for that league, which probably lasted a summer. And then the ABL and the WNBA back to back. Mm-hmm. And I think the emergence of those two leagues, that was finally the NBA was supporting it. Mm-hmm. But there were 3 tries, and it finally took off. God, what year would that have been? 93, 94, 95. I don't remember the year that it started. I remember I have T-shirts from going to the coaches convention. We're next. The WNBA on the back of the shirt, it says we're next. I have on the front it said ABL and it was pretty cool. But I don't remember the year of that. But yeah, so it went from 84 to 93. So a 10-year turnaround. A long time.
A long time. A long time. And so with your playing days done as the league, folded, did you end up back at Canisius then as an assistant right away? Like what was that your next step?
When I went home for Christmas, with the intention of going to Atlanta, my apartment building had a fire. So someone I knew that still lived down there packed up all my stuff, and pretty much that was the closure to Atlanta. So that would have been in February. That spring, I was full-time substitute teacher in my high school, elementary school, that district, and was working as a waitress at TGI Fridays. And again, that, I don't know what to say. My life, I'll always make something that's kind of not sketchy, but something that some people would think, oh, really? I would say, no, this is this is an experience I need to live, and I'll find something positive out of it. So being a waitress at Fridays was that experience. Pressure, fast pace, on your feet. It was very much like being an athlete, working with other servers and cooks. So I did that for a year, and then Mike Grapple was promoted to the head coaching position when Sister Maria went to Marquette University. So she leaving dominoed me coming back. And it was a prayer answered that I didn't even pray for. It was just nice to be back at Canisius, nice to see the improvement in the program, the commitment going from Division II to Division I in 1986. That was a big commitment for the players as much as the coaches and the college financially. So that's how I ended up back at Canisius.
So what was that when you came back, and you saw improvements, and at that point moving to Division I, I believe it was at that point that the NCAA said you have to be one in everything. You can't divide up your men's and women's sports or other sports. So more commitment, but what did you see that was different? And with more, I'm wondering, I would assume is bad, right? But that with more financial commitment from the university saying, okay, we're going to do this, there's more expectation placed on the coaches and the student athletes. So what was your experience like when you first came back as an assistant coach in that way?
So when I came back in 86, I was a part-time assistant coach making $5,000. In order to help me, I was in the fall semester only a part-time admissions counselor, because in the fall all the admissions counselors are on the road recruiting. They needed people in the office to help with on-campus visits. So I was making $10,000. And then at the semester break, they decided to keep me on for another semester in the admissions office. So I was living in Buffalo on $15,000. And
that's per year, right? So
that was that year.
Year, yeah. But I want people to understand, that's not $5,000 a month. That was for the season, for the year. Yeah.
For the year. And my roommate was a St. Bonaventure point guard, Margaret Feeney. So we were living life large on $15,000. But I don't think there was expectation yet, because I was a part-time coach at $5,000. My second year, then the college expanded my role. I became a full-time assistant coach, and I don't remember my salary, but it was more than $15,000. But probably not much more. But I did have benefits. And we were in, we were in a conference, but I don't recall the conference. It was mainly New York, New England schools. And in terms of expectations, we were expected to put a quality team on the floor. We were expected to have, athletes that went to class. No different than any other year, but it was definitely something that we heard a lot. So you need to bring in the right players. You need to, commitment and graduation rate wasn't talked about at that point, but that was expected. In terms of commitment to the program, we were funded differently, still not the same as the men. We took day bus trips to Albany. They took overnight trips to Albany. It's the same game. They had to be more rested, I guess. Their opponents were further distance away. We stayed regionally. One fun fact is that was the year the women's basketball ball got smaller. So when I was in college, we played with the same size ball as the men do currently, where 1986 the women's ball became the smaller ball. So that was something unusual and unique, and maybe that, I don't think that was determined because of Canisius moving to Division I, but it was an exciting principle to share with recruits. So it was hard to recruit to Canisius at that time. I think it always is hard to recruit to Canisius just because of the campus location, landlocked. You go to St. Bonaventure and it's a big sprawling campus with a lot of opportunities. In Buffalo, it's landlocked. You can only get so big, and you can't build incredibly spectacular facilities that maybe you can at other campuses. But it was great. I think my life, as it's even evolving now, I wouldn't trade it for anything. Canisius was the right place for me, and I will forever bleed blue and gold.
And, you mentioned like the difficult recruiting. What were, as an assistant, and then I don't know if it changed too when you took over as head coach, what was recruiting like, and how did that change, not just from the Canisius standpoint of trying to attract players, but what were you seeing in the talent level of players? And had you already started to notice the change where girls in high school were focusing on basketball more as opposed to having that that multi-sport background? What was that like for you?
Yeah, that's a great question, because we did recruit locally, but there weren't events and showcases to go to for those local athletes to attend to see talent outside their area. So they felt as if they were the best, in New York, when in reality, take them out of Buffalo and place them in New York City and they would get eaten alive. So we recruited locally. We didn't have the budget to travel to recruit. So that was a difference early on. As I progressed through as an assistant coach to a head coach, it was expected that we recruit more nationally. And if you're recruiting nationally, you have to have finances to travel there, to spend a week there, to transport an athlete and their family back to Buffalo for visits. So everything changed through my 12 years there, in the sense that we needed, the college needed more funding for every sport, just not women's basketball. It was every sport. Even, we would have staff meetings and athletic department with Bill Maher, our compliance coordinator, and then financial aid would come in and we would talk about it. And Mike and I would look at each other like, we have it really good. We have 13 full scholarships to offer. And you would think that, there's no struggle there for us. And then you go to softball and they have 3 full scholarships, and you try to figure out how to make it work. You divvy it up, and you get the best you can. And we were lucky with basketball, so we thought everyone would want to come to Canisius College because we had full scholarships. But all the top talent also went to other campuses that had more facilities, brighter facilities, deeper, richer support services. And so that's why it was hard to recruit at Canisius College.
When you were, I find it interesting, you were talking about like recruiting locally, and that they didn't really have those showcases to go to compare themselves to other places, other players throughout the state. When you were like, especially someone that, you grew up in the general region, but outside, what was that, the culture for girls sports like when you were trying to recruit some of these players and recruit locally? What did you notice about that culture for girls, obviously your girls basketball in the area?
It was transitioning from the Empire State Games. Like, that was the only showcase event. Again, through my college years. And then once I began recruiting in '86, I noticed that AAU was becoming the showcase for girls basketball. I think it had always been there for volleyball. I think other sports had really dedicated to AAU, but basketball was just picking up its pace in 1986. So I found it strange that young women didn't want to compete in the Empire State Games because I had such a great experience. Like, come on. And they were going the AAU route, and AAU coaches were stipulating you're either with us or you're with the Empire State Games. You can't do both. So it was beginning to tear the Empire State Games apart. But the AAU athletes were getting out of the region. They were finding that they weren't as talented as they thought they were. We would go to big showcase events in New York, Philadelphia, in Maryland, and a team from New York would be there. Someone from Buffalo, someone from Rochester. Okay, I have to see that because they're in our backyard. And they would never get the ball over half court. The talent level was so far behind at that point because we were so encapsulated. So AAU has really developed the women's basketball programs over the years. And with that, they're single sport athletes again. And that's the difference between when I grew up to now. They can't do multi-sports. Their coaches won't allow them. It's really unfortunate.
Yeah. It is. As you moving away from the recruiting piece. So when you first came as student athlete at Canisius, you're like, wow, I get my sneakers, right? Like, you see things differently when you're an athlete. Now go to, the early 90s as the head coach of that program. What are you seeing? Where has the school improved? Obviously you mentioned, some of those because if they were going to go D1, they needed to put some financial resources. But were there attitude shifts at all? Like, did you see anything that was different when you were head coach than when you were a student? Or
as an assistant coach to head coach, I didn't notice anything different. Okay. I've thought about this so many times in my life, in my career. But sometimes I wonder I was the easy hire. Was I the best hire? I don't know. Was Canisius taking the easy way out and just keeping me and not having to do a search? I feel like I was a quality coach and a quality person, and I knew the game, but were they taking the easy way out? So that's one thing that always sticks with me. It's kind of a thorn in my side, especially I didn't have the success that they expected, that I expected personally. And so I've done a lot of internal thinking about that. Could they have funded our program differently, more, just differently? I had a full-time assistant coach and a graduate assistant. The men's program had 2 full, if not 3 full-time assistants and a graduate assistant. So there's the inequities. It's a sensitive topic for me.
Yeah.
In that time frame, I had 2 children. I didn't recruit for 2 summers because of having just had the kids. So there's a lot of things that didn't go right for me and our program because of my family and my life getting in the way. But I think things shifted as soon as I left.
Okay.
The new coach came in and made double my salary. The new coach came in and had 2 full-time assistants. Like, me leaving was the best thing for Canisius basketball, I think. And it was the right decision for me in my personal life. So I don't have regrets of that either. But I just wish that, I had put a better product on the floor, and, those losses didn't stick with me forever.
You never get over those losses, right?
Right.
A lot of them. Do you feel, I mean, I'm not talking about Canisius specifically, just generally, that there's more support for women who are in athletics that are having a family and have a young family, so that they get support that they need in order to stay and succeed in that job? Or is it maybe just that we no?
I don't see it.
Yeah.
I don't see it. You don't want to treat people differently. You really don't. You have the same expectation, male or female. But it's just different for women coaching, because young children want their mom. They don't want their dad. They want their mom. And so you have a male head coach that's always on the road. The kids don't. That's normal. But if your mom is on the road all the time, I don't see, and this is me not being involved at the Division I level, so I could be misspeaking, but I don't think there's a side allowance for a nanny to travel. It's expected that if I'm bringing my kids on the road and I want them there, I have to hire someone out of my own pocket. They would not do that on the men's side. So I don't see any more support for women coaches than men. I don't see them taking into consideration the time or the energy. It's just we need, especially now, coaching is wins and losses, and you got to figure out how to make it work.
Do you see that potential for that to change at all, or do you think that it's like this is the job you signed up for, so you have to figure it out if you want to succeed here?
I think that it's a job you signed up for. You've experienced it with your coaches when you've been as playing. You've witnessed strong coaches leave the profession because of families. It's the nature of the beast. Mm-hmm. I don't envy Division I coaches right now for a lot of reasons. And I mean, I don't really want to talk about it, but the portal is killing college athletics. It's really, Division III is where it's at. Because kids aren't jumping around as much.
Right.
And, it's very unfortunate, but I don't see a difference. To get back to your point, I don't see a difference in support for a male coach, female coach.
As same track, but a little bit different. As you moved into, you've been at Hilbert for a number of years now, and you moved into as you've done more administrative type roles, mm-hmm. and in addition, how much have you felt either called to or to advocate for female athletes or female coaches? Do you feel like that's part of your role?
I do. I feel like every college athlete should have the same experience that I had. It's unfortunate, though, that in my role, because student athletes I don't get a chance to interact with them enough. But in my role, I sit and watch and observe and, see tendencies, and I judge kids. So the kids that really need a lift, I'll make sure I say something to them to give them a hand up. But I don't, there's not enough female coaches for me to serve as a role model. We have a young hockey coach right now, and every day she's finding out something different about me, and she's just blown away. And I'm like, I don't talk about myself. Even doing this is hard. I don't feel like my history is what you should be judging me on. I think you should be judging me on my everyday performance. So I'm trying to be a role model to her because she's a young coach. But beyond that, we have 2 other female coaches in our department. And we have 19 teams. Half of them are women's sports. So you do the math there. But I don't think women are getting into coaching at our level because it's a Division III program, so the financial commitment isn't there. But so that's the hard part. I would love to be engaged more with other females within our region. And there are ways to do it. But right now, in my role, I write about the student athletes, post-game recaps. So I will always try to find something positive to say. I grabbed one of the student athletes in the hallway the other day and just said, you got to stop. I got to tell you this because you don't talk to me enough, but you've done some really good things. I've seen such growth and maturity in your career, and I just want you to hear that because I'll never talk to you again. And, the response was, wow, thank you. That means a lot. I don't know. It's college athletics it has its ups and its downs, but you need to share some kind of positive message every day.
And I think that we forget in general as human beings when someone stops and tells you that's important. But I think especially that college age when someone stops and says, hey, I've seen your improvement, how positively impactful that can be for someone. And it's a small thing saying something, but it has such an impact later on.
And it would mean the world to them if they saw it in a social media post.
Well, make a TikTok about it, and there you go.
Right. But I feel like face-to-face is the way to do things all the time, or pick up a phone and call someone versus email. So that's really how I try to live my life. So I was happy to do that yesterday.
So kind of segues because you're being a support for some of those student athletes that you see. And I know it changes over time, but where are some places throughout your career, whether it was back playing or coaching or even now, where you found the most support?
As a player, it would be my family, my parents. Times are so different now. Our parents of our women's team in the early 80s, they would hop on the bus. We would stop at the thruway, pick up 2 or 3 sets of parents. They'd get on the bus. They would drive with us to Albany, cheer, be at the game, support us, bring food. We would come home, drop them off at the exit, and continue on to Buffalo. So our families, the community at Canisius at that time was just so special. As a coach, we had a pretty good start of a booster club. There was support there, people that really cared about the program. But beyond that, I think as a coach with kids, my in-laws, I don't think I could have stayed in coaching for as long as I did without my in-laws because they took care of my kids when my husband was working. So it comes in all different, it doesn't have to be financial support. It's emotional support. It's a hug here and there, and I don't know. It was a great career.
Yes. And so then last question for you, which is usually the hardest question. What is one or a couple, you have to pick your favorite, but one of a favorite memory that you have of playing or coaching? Like what's one or two of those?
A funny memory, and then I'll get serious. A funny memory is freshman year, we had a senior teammate. We knew she was about to score her 1,000th point. I mean, this is such a silly story. And I often wasn't on the bench, but I was on the bench at that time. And we were at Cornell. I think it was Cornell. And she scored it. And I'm with my 2 freshman teammates from Fairport, and we hated each other in high school, and now we're teammates and we're blood sisters. It's so funny how this all happens, but we were told, you need to get up and you need to rush the floor and you need to cheer her on and congratulate her. And she scores it. Everybody gets up. The third, I was the first, the middle, and the third. She steps forward, trips the second person who trips me, and we're laying in front of the bench. Like, what just happened? And everyone else is out on the court. So that was like my favorite funny moment as a Canisius student athlete. But I have a great memory as a coach. As you know, when I graduated, I was the all-time leading scorer. And as an assistant coach, we recruited Heather Fiore, who then broke my record. And the night she broke my record, we were on MAC TV, which is so, like, every game is televised now. So at that time, it was special. We were the game of the week. It was on MAC TV at St. Peter's. And Heather carried us to overtime, and we ended up losing in overtime by 5 points or something. But I knew it was coming. She scored like 46 points that game, and she needed, like 35 to break it. And then she hit it, and everybody knew it. And I was excited at the moment because we were in the game and she was playing so well. I was excited for her, but inside I was a little like, But then I had, we're in the game, we're going to win, we're going to overtime, blah, blah, blah. She ended up, as I said, we ended up losing. But that's what records are for. They're made to be broken. And then my last year coaching, we recruited Shauna Garrison, who ended up, having a fantastic career at Canisius and coaching now at Illinois. Bringing her in and signing her to a letter of intent, and then at the end of the year deciding I just couldn't do it anymore. So I walked away from that. So that's an unfortunate memory. But I don't know. There's so many good memories to pick the best. It's hard.
Yeah. I know. It's a question everybody hates.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But it gets you thinking about some of
Yeah.
those funny stories that are... I love those. I love the funny stories.
Yeah, there's so many that I could share with you that are off court that are inappropriate.
Well, Kara, is there anything that we didn't talk about, that I didn't ask you, that you wanna mention?
No. It really, this is hard for me to like go back and try to live my life when, I hate people that, I think the funny thing about male athletes, here's the kicker. Men live in the past. Like they put their worth in the world on their achievements. And I think as female administrators, coaches, we just live for the moment and move forward. I often am introduced by one certain person as, oh, this is Kara Rehbaum. She's a Hall of Famer. Oh, she's a Hall of Famer. And I'm looking at it like, I am more than a Hall of Famer. And so that always, that bothers me. I'm not going to introduce you as Amy that worked at the Buffalo News. It's just, people are funny, but that's one thing. To have to go back and think about everything, it's cloudy. It's cloudy. I like living in the moment and moving forward.
Well, Kara, thank you for stepping out of your comfort zone then to talk to us and share your memories and share that story for that history of women's basketball in Western New York and at Canisius. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.